This is an ABP Live Podcast.
Joining me today in conversation is Aman Singh Maharaj, straight from South Africa. What's up? How are you, Aman?
I'm good, thanks. Yourself, Aabir?
You have come up with a new book called A Dalliance with Destiny. This talks about it's a sort of a fiction and it's a bridge between a fiction and a non-fiction, I suppose.
No. I don't want anyone to confuse
Okay.
the protagonist with me.
Okay.
He's not exactly a very lovable character.
Okay.
He's a bit of a misogynist.
Okay.
I made him short as well.
No. By non-fiction, I mean it can be inspired from somebody else's
Yes,
life
yes,
as well.
yeah.
So it's a what I personally felt, it's a combination of fiction and non-fiction.
It comes a bit from my travels. I've traveled the length and breadth of India.
Okay.
The only place in India that I haven't really been is you're far northeast, like in Meghalaya and so forth. But everywhere else I have been.
Okay. Would you mind sharing about your life? How, were you born and raised in South Africa? As per my conversation with you, you said that you are the fourth generation in your family who is from South Africa.
So, depending on which prong, my nana's on my maternal side, I'm third generation. On my paternal side, I'm fourth generation. But there are people that go up to 8 generations in South Africa. Kids who are being born now, 9th generation, because people went to South Africa around from 1860. Mauritius was a little bit earlier, 1838. So all those countries where they left as indentured laborers by the British Raj, it happened after slavery was abolished. So, but indenture was the same as slavery. It was just, there was a contract written.
True.
And so people who went to Fiji and went to Mauritius, South Africa, they went to Trinidad. V.S. Naipaul is the son of indenture as well. And Suriname and British Guyana. So these were all indentured. And they went well before all the Indians who went to UK and USA.
Okay. How has been the life changing experience now for all these families? Certainly, this is not, they are not laborers anymore, I'm sure about
Yes,
that. They have moved on, they have developed their life in a number of ways. But how big is the community there in South Africa for Indians?
So I think until about 20 years ago, South Africa had the largest population of Indians outside of India.
Okay.
And now, Durban itself has about 1.2 million Indians. But, Dubai has overtaken. Dubai has 3.5 million in the city itself. So there's this new influx of Indians who are going towards the West. And Dubai is not the West, it's the Middle East, but it's got a Western sort of vibe to it. But, looking at South Africa, we are a mix of Hindus, Christians and Muslims, majority Hindu. And we came from the states of, in the north, it was UP and it was Bihar.
Okay.
And in the south, they came from what was Telangana and Andhra Pradesh now. And then they came from Tamil Nadu. And that was called the Madras Presidency in the olden days.
Okay.
And then the Gujaratis followed about 10, 15 years later when they saw the opportunity for business.
Okay.
So they didn't go as indentured laborers, they went as businessmen.
Okay.
But very small scale.
Okay. And all these people are actually businessmen now, like the entire Indian community, or they are into working
I
stuff?
think they're professional. Look, there's a dichotomy. With each community, you get the very poor, you get the very rich.
True.
So you actually have neighborhoods that are very, very poor and they live below the breadline. But by and large, within a generation of going there as indentured laborers, we started producing doctors and lawyers and teachers and, we really prospered because that is the nature of the Indian. Wherever we go, we make a success of ourselves. And you don't know how they do it. How do the parents afford to start sending the kids overseas to study because there was no amenities to study tertiary education in South Africa for Indians. It was under apartheid in those days.
Right.
So, it's about our resilience as a community. I don't think any other, maybe it sounds a little bit racist, maybe it's biased, but I don't think any other community is as resilient as the Indian and as focused on education as we are.
Now let's dig deep into your life personally. How has been the life? Where were you born? How were you raised? What kind of education did you have? As far as I know, you had a pretty decent, good education.
Well, I can't say it was by design. There was a lot of there was a lot of stress on education generally from Indian people. I grew up in a small farming community.
Okay.
It is the town, but it is surrounded by acres of sugar.
Not in Durban. Not in Durban.
Not in. I was about an hour away from Durban.
Okay.
And strangely enough, right up to the 1990s, we were still caste conscious. Not myself personally, but the family I came from. So, for example, when you say caste conscious, they had to marry within their own caste. That was the only practice of caste. And it only died around 1990 because I think with 1.2 million Indians, you already became so integrated with people from the other caste.
Right.
Then you have to end up marrying your second cousins, which is not allowed in Hinduism. So, but with understanding and, I think with the arrival of the Arya Samaj, which did away with caste and, promoted more philosophical matters rather than ritualistic, that awareness came about.
Okay.
And then when my parents divorced, I moved down to Durban.
Okay.
So from a little farm boy, I became now a small fish in a big pond.
Okay.
But suddenly I became very naughty.
Okay.
I was very much cloistered growing up in a farming community.
True.
And
it's a sudden exodus of energy,
yes,
I guess. Yeah.
I mean, suddenly you got access to. Suddenly I started watching. I was in standard 7, which is a grade 9. I don't know what terms you use here. Suddenly, from being very, living in a bubble, suddenly I was watching pornographic movies overnight. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on camera.
Feel free to say anything, whatever you feel like.
My teenage years just changed dramatically from what it was pre-teen. And there's a difference between living in the city and living in a rural, semi-rural
Woods.
community.
Yeah. You've been a traveler. You have traveled all across the world, here, there, everywhere. What has been the fundamental learning from all these travels?
For me, it's about the appreciation of different cultures. So I'm not trained in anthropology, but the moment I land in any new city, strangely, it's not, I mean, I love looking at buildings and stuff. I'm an engineer, but I want to go to the marketplace. One is because I love fruit. But two, if you want to get a feel for the vibe of any city, you go to the
Marketplace.
and that is where you see the reality of what life is in that city. And you just experience that vibe. I'm the kind of person, I love noise. It may sound strange, but I can study with absolute
Chaos
around me. It would not affect me. I can study through it.
Okay.
So I love being surrounded by people, being in like you said, in a little bit of chaos. Chaos works for me.
Okay. Are the people very spiritual in nature, especially the Indian community there in South Africa, or it's slightly different from what? Because since it's a very majority-driven, culturally-driven country, India is a very culturally-driven country. I guess that may not be the same for South Africa, but do the Indian community, especially,
they are religiously driven and culturally driven. Look, the Muslims are very strong in their beliefs.
Okay.
There's different sects of Muslims, but they're pretty strong. I mean, by and large, a lot of them still do go 5 times a day to read namaz at the mosque. If not, they'll do it at home.
Okay.
I think the Hindus are not as stringent, which is a pity.
Okay.
But my own family is very traditional. On my father's side, they were Pandits going back 10 generations. My father was a Pandit.
Okay.
My Dada was a Pandit and so forth. I went back to the village and I traced the fact their names were written in the temple books.
In India?
In India, yeah. In the village that they left, which took a hell of a long time.
I'll come to this journey as well. Yeah, you please go ahead.
And on my mother's side, my Nana was one of the founding fathers of the Arya Samaj. So he was more philosophical.
Okay.
Whilst my paternal side was more ritualistic.
Okay.
So we have certainly kept it. We practice, I just finished Pitar Paksh, so I did my prayers.
Okay.
I do the Pitra Paksh prayers. But not everyone does it.
Okay.
But so you can't use me as a benchmark.
Which makes sense. I guess that will be the case here, there, everywhere in the world. Every human being is different. Every family is different. But more or less, what you are saying is that people are culturally inclined, even if they are not in India.
Diwali is celebrated. Holi was never celebrated because Holi is a seasonal
It's a season change, yeah.
So you guys are in the northern hemisphere, we in the southern, and it's so the heralding of spring. So we never celebrated it, but now there's been an assimilation of Holi, where it's called the Festival of Color, and all races are playing it at any time.
So
It's called the Festival of Color. But when it comes to the other religious days, Ram Navami, Gita Week, and Krishna Janmashtami, and so forth, Navratri is on. Navratri is very big.
Okay.
Especially in the Gujarati community, it's a huge, they do their Garba and so forth.
Okay.
So it's very, very big. So we still got a lot of village traditions in the way we do things.
Okay.
But they've been given a local flavor. In fact, in the way that they speak Hindi. Okay, my Hindi is not so great, but if I listen to how my parents spoke Hindi, it was Bhojpuri, but a Bhojpuri dialect that was very specific to South Africa.
South Africa.
And it's the same everywhere. In Fiji, they call it Fiji Bar. And
Okay.
they will use a bit of Fijian words and so forth. That's how it is. And the same with Trinidad and then in Suriname, they'll speak Surinamese Bhojpuri.
We were having this conversation some time back, and you mentioned that you actually traced down your ancestral home in India. How was the experience, and where exactly it is? Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, so on my paternal side, they are from Allahabad, which is now Prayagraj, and they in a sub-district of Handia, and they came from a village that was called Koratiwarika Purva. Now, this was spelled like that because the translator, when the person said, when you landed in South Africa, where were you from, what village, they pronounced it heavily. So the British guy would have written it in a wrong way. So when I went to Allahabad and I went to the sub-district of Handia, I looked for any town that had, or village that had the name like Tiwari in it. The problem is, wherever there was a Tiwari family staying, it was called Tiwaripur. So in Handia itself, which is a sub-district, there were about 6 or 7 Tiwaripurs. Eventually, the last village that I went to, which was called Pure Tiwari, when I went there and as we entered there, we saw the Ganga was flowing right aside the village. And then I remembered what my father had told me, Ganga Kinare, that is where the village was, on the banks of the Ganga.
Oh.
And that was the only one that was there. So when I spoke to the village headman, I made friends with him. So he told me it was called Kurd Tiwaripur. But when there was a flood, the villages got separated. One became Kurd and one became Tiwaripur. So that's how the British spelled it, Kur Tiwarika Purva. But then I knew that validated it was the right village. So it was fantastic to go there. And I think my great-grandfather left a brother there.
Okay.
But I just spent a day, we couldn't find the family list. But apparently if you go to Haridwar, there are these priests that keep track of families.
The pandas.
Pandas, yeah. Who keep track. So I'm going to Dehradun and to Haridwar on Sunday. So I'm going to try and track my forefathers' lineage like that. And then on my mother's side, because my Nana was born, he only left India in 1906. But finding this village called Kusmara in the district of Geelong was quite difficult.
Okay.
Because there were...
Where exactly is Geelong?
Geelong is above Jhansi. So, people know Jhansi Karani, so they'll know. It's on the border of Madhya Pradesh.
Madhya Pradesh and UP.
And UP, yeah. So, when I went there were like 4 Kusmaras. So, in the archives, in the ship list where it's written what village your forefathers came from, it's written there the largest village that has a police station nearest to it. And that's called a Thana.
Thana.
And when I looked for this Thana called Ren Roar, I went around asking. So eventually one village guide told me there's a Ren Dar and there's a Kusmara next to it. So the problem is when the British guys wrote it down, when it was written as Ren Roar and not Ren Dar, because that is what they heard. But that's when we figured out this is the place. And then when we went there, they told us where the clan that I came from, not just the caste, but the clan within it. And I found the actual property, and strangely, the roof had caved in, all the walls had fallen down, except for the prayer wall, the shrine wall is still standing. And I decided, in that spirit of the moment, that I'm going to finance converting that property into a library cum clinic.
And this is Dada ka ghar?
My nani nana.
Nani Nana ka ghar.
So it was very exciting, very emotional for me. And we going there, we went with our entire sort of kutum, if you can call it, our family.
Yeah.
Just to go. Was one of my mamas came with me, and his father was born there, so it was very exciting for him as well to go back there. And I remember we broke one loki and we took it back to the hotel. We said, you have to make something with it. So for the first time in my life, I had loki ka halwa.
Wow.
Absolutely tasty. I never thought you can make halwa out of loki, but
That is a delicacy everybody enjoys. I
it was
guess, loki.
fantastic. So when we went back to Kanpur, we had that. Yeah.
So cool. What exactly was the thought when you were trying to write this book? How did you plan to write this book?
Honestly, you know what? I think everyone has a novel within them. The thing is, when do you find the time to write it? And when I started writing that book, I was suspended at work. I was working for the city of Durban. And I became what is called a whistleblower.
Okay.
One of my bosses was corrupt. I reported it. But instead of them dealing with him because he was politically connected, they suspended me. So for 3 months, they just made me sit in my office. They were paying me, but I was not allowed to do anything. And after a week, I thought I'm going to go mad. So I said, okay, I have my laptop, I have my time free. Let me just start writing the book that I always wanted to write. So within 3 months, I wrote 1,200 pages. And it took me 16 years to edit it down to...
16 years.
I was very meticulous. I wanted a almost perfect book. So it took me 16 years to edit it down to 400 pages.
Okay.
And ultimately, if I go through that book now, I'll still find something that will irritate me.
Okay.
So finally, it's the reader who completes the novel.
Which makes sense. Yeah. If you are given 30 seconds to just explain the book to a layman, to all our audience, what will you say? What exactly this book is all
Well,
about?
I'll say what it is not. It is not literature for everyone. This is literature. It's not pulp fiction. It's not an easy book to understand. I think you have to be at a certain level of understanding to wade through a book like this.
Okay.
Having said that, those who loved it, totally loved it. Those who couldn't understand it, left it down after 5 or 6 pages. But in India, it seems to be being a phenomenal success. So it's about a guy living in South Africa. Apartheid has just ended. Everyone is euphoric. Suddenly South Africa has entered the mainstream and the world is celebrating. It was a bloodless revolution. But he's saying, okay, so what? I'm feeling out of place. Do I belong here? I'm, second, third, fourth generation, but should I be here? And then he starts getting these signs and nudges. He needs to go to India, which is a cliche, to find yourself. But the story, the storyline itself is not a cliche. I should have put like a 2 to 18 age restriction on the book itself. It's a bit raunchy. But if you watch Eat, Pray, Love, it's Eat, Pray, Love on steroids.
Oh.
It's extremely, it cuts to the very core of you. And there were times when I was writing the book, it used to make me very emotional. But anyway, he goes from village to village, from city to city, looking for love, sex, a guru. And then he travels up the Ganges from Sagar Island in Calcutta, where the Ganges flows out, up to the source. And he goes through the different ancestral villages looking for some sort of connection. And at the same time, he's looking for love. So he's looking for an identity. He's dislocated, so he doesn't know where he belongs. So that's what the book is all about.
It's basically a journey of a man who is born and raised in South Africa, but traces his roots to India, and he's just traveling across India just to find love, sex, and guru.
Whatever he is meant to be, he doesn't know what he is. Whether he's lonely or whether he's just looking to have sexual escapades, which is a strange thing to look at in India. But in Calcutta, he actually shacks up with an Anglo-Indian girl. That's where most of the Anglo-Indians are. And I think the Anglo-Indians were generally the more liberal of all the communities. They were the first cohort, the Anglo-Indians, to become what you call air hostesses. So they were quite liberal compared to, if I can call them, the full-blooded Indians.
Okay. What do you think about, what kind of parallels can you draw from between India and South Africa? Maybe like politically, maybe culturally, or if you look from a global perspective.
Well, culturally, I still I eat with we eat with our hands, but then we get some idiots eating roti and they eat using a fork and knife. How do you use a fork and knife to eat roti? I eat curry 4 times a week. If I don't have curry within 3 days, I get, palpitation.
Like curry, you means curry or kadhi?
No, not curry. Curry, I love curry.
Okay.
But curry, I'm talking about curry itself, yeah. And you get withdrawal symptoms if you don't have a curry within 3 or 4 days because it's addictive.
True.
We go to the temple, there's lots of temples there. Hindi, I think, has become more about watching Bollywood for people.
Okay. Do you consume Bollywood films?
I do, but I'm a diehard. You ask me what do I like, I'll watch a Mother India. That to me was a true feminism, So I love watching the old movies. I listen to the old Hindi songs, but the other generations, I listen to the modern songs. But I listen to the modern songs as well.
Which makes sense.
But in terms of although we are generally the toppers in the exams, although we're only 1.5%, we still cannot compare the intellectual capabilities of the Indian in South Africa to the Indians in India. You guys are on a different level. The kind of competition is unbelievable. So I think, we are big fish in a small pond. But suddenly if you come to India, we realize even the taxi driver can talk philosophy with you and you can embarrass yourself.
I guess philosophy is something which every Indian flaunts on.
Exactly. But, and he's well read. People read.
Yeah, true. When was the last experience you had like a philosophy talk with a taxi driver?
I had it in February in Bombay. The guy had a master's, but he couldn't get a job. But he just had a love, wearing his jeans and his chappals, driving his taxi, but talking to me about the actual significance and symbolism behind certain rituals in Hinduism. And I had a lovely chat with him. And I think he maybe have driven me a little longer, but he didn't charge me for it because he was enjoying it equally much.
That makes sense. On that note, I guess I feel the same because I had an interesting conversation with you about your life, about your book, and I really hope to read this book very soon. And to all the listeners and viewers out there, it's a lovely book. I feel that this is going to be an interesting read for me particularly. I'll surely share the feedback with you once I
complete. And if you've got kids, don't let them read the book.
Okay.
Or nephews and nieces. And
sure. On that note, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. Thank you for coming to ABP Live Podcast. It was wonderful having this conversation with you.
And I had a lovely chat with you as well.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you very much.
Okay.